unnerving Witchery by Phil and Jackie Lovesey. An unforgettable odyssey brimming with witches, ancient secrets, dark deeds, and magical adventures. Part 8. The League finally becomes. When Sinchkin awoke, it was still night. She knew it should be morning, as she had slept soundly and felt completely refreshed. Yet overhead stars still twinkled, and a full moon lit the valley that had crept up and somehow surrounded her as she'd slept. It can be confusing at first, Idla told her. Sinchkin raised herself up onto an elbow, Idla shifting and climbing up onto her shoulder as she slowly stood. So I gather. Day and night have no meaning on Treffelpugger Path, Sinchkin. Neither does time itself. Here you can be stuck for a lifetime, only to emerge a mere blink snap before you ventured in. But Sinchkin was in no mood for more riddles. Her shoulder still ached from the weight of the annoying bird, and despite her asking it not to, it was still talking absolute nonsense. Day or night, to her this was morning, and she needed some breakfast. She set off along the narrow valley, moonlight illuminating the slowly moving mountains all around her. When the path looked as if it would veer left, it turned right. When she thought it climbed, the ground shifted and descended, valley sides narrowing as she looked for succulent shoots or shrooms she could eat. Yet after a while, the path began to level, giving way to flatter grasses and just a few scattered trees. In the distance, a fire crackled, sending long flicking shadows across the valley. Her ears pricked as she heard voices and made out the unmistakable shape of a large steaming cauldron under an old oak tree. Instantly she drew her small wand. "Your magic is useless on the path," Idla scolded her. "What wand could ever match it?" Peering ahead, Sinchkin now made out two witches stirring the cauldron, moonlight glinting off their long ladle. One held a glowing roffer broom, while the other's red hair danced in the breeze. "You are here," Idla told her. "The rest is now up to you. Approach the cauldron. Stand on the small rock next to it. You will be safe for now." Sinchkin yelped as Idla launched herself from her shoulder and flew up into the oak tree. Instantly, the ground beneath her small feet began to glow bright red. The heat was intolerable. Crying out, she scrambled for the small rock, clambering up, the pain thankfully receding. The two witches looked over the bubbling cauldron at their visitor. "Well," the red-haired witch sharply observed, "Idla has found her?" In the branches above, Idla bowed. The witch looked Sinchkin up and down, frowning slightly. Quite a letdown to meet her in the flesh. "Indeed," her companion observed. "All this trouble over such an oily witch. She does seem rather disappointing." "And yet the path and the ancients have willed it, which also cannot be denied. Our feelings about her suitability for such a magical task are made irrelevant. The motives are quite hidden from us, as they always have been." The red-haired witch sighed. She pointed at Sinchkin. "Yet it all seems so splurt. Why look, she barely rises to my knee." "Oidy she may be," the other witch agreed. "Yet she also shows no twizzles either. There's many who might stand in her place right now who would be shaking so badly they'd have quite fallen from the oily rock that keeps her from the fires." The red-haired witch looked at the small rock under Sinchkin's feet. "True," she admitted. "It does seem that the rock itself has been fashioned for the smallest, oiliest witch. I would have trouble balancing on it with just one leg." So perhaps this oily explorer is indeed a destiny foretold. The second witch now gently prodded Sinchkin in her heavily beating chest. See, she stands quite rooted to it, as true as any that stood on the flattest ground. And yet, the red-haired witch observed, she says not a word. Ah, but challenges with her eyes look as if the very fires of Treffelbugger Path blaze within them. Such spirit for such an oidy thing. The second witch smiled at Sinchkin. Welcome, Sinchkin, eternal wanderer. You are finally home. Sinchkin said nothing, trapped on the rock, wondering if she could possibly make a grab for the broom and fly away. Granted, it was huge compared to her own, but it would be better than being boiled for breakfast. The second witch looked at her. But why would you wish to fly away, Sinchkin? Her voice was quieter, kinder than the red-haired companion. Aren't you happy here on the path? Isn't it everything you ever desired, to discover Treffelbugger Path, then map its ever-twisting journey? Sinchkin tried not to sound too twizzled. You are both large witches. I am just an oidy earth weaver. You would need a witch 4 times my size just to eat your fill. The kinder witch laughed. Don't you know who we are? No, I simply want to be on my way with my bird. The red-haired witch snarled, hissing through her long, sharp teeth. The Soothwing does our bidding, not yours, you insolent splurk. Idler led you to us in the first place. She took a breath, slightly shocked. You really have no idea who we are? Sinchkin shook her head. The kinder witch chuckled. Then it is exactly as foretold. She leant right down to Sinchkin. Until recently, I was Grand Zorkly High Priestess of the League of Lid-Curving Witchery. My name is Vayanna. She now pointed at the frowning red-haired witch. And this is Algarin, an explorer and adventurer just like you, who made the great crossing from the Howling Lands and established Trasgar, the very first home of the League. It was Sinchkin's turn to frown. You're both already stroffed? Vayanna nodded, lowering her voice to a whisper. How else do you think we can survive on the path? She pointed to Idler. And that, as you already know, is Idler. But she's a Soothwing, a messenger of the ancients, who upon our bidding brought you to us. You really haven't heard of me? Algarin asked, bemused. Surely I am the most famous of all the League's sisters. Sinchkin looked from one to the other. However splurk the situation was, she couldn't ignore the obvious dangers. The cauldron was still furiously boiling. It wouldn't take much for either of them to toss her straight into it. I simply want to be on my way, she said. She looked at Algarin. And if it makes you feel any better, I do now remember some of the spuddles told about you. Algarin expectantly raised her eyebrows. And even if you both really are who you say you are, I can only speak my truth. Vayanna chuckled. For one so oidy, she has a big heart. Or a splurked head, Algarin replied. Careful with your words, Sinchkin, for while I no longer require broth, it would still give me great pleasure to see the skin drop from your bones. Sinchkin steadied herself on the rock. Well, the spuddles I heard of you, Algarin, told of a splurked witch who ran away from her sisters when they most needed her. A savage witch that took only the weakest on a journey to escape her own death and maintain her lust for power. She looked Algarin fearlessly in the eyes. She was a witch who only cared for her own survival. Many were lost in the icy seas, yet she survived, only to be overpowered by the Dale's creature who built Trasgar all around her while she did nothing, and witches were banished to their own quarter and treated as splurked amusements for rich merchant families. Algarin sadly shook her head. So much gets lost in the telling over time. Now Vienna pressed. And me? What do you know of me? Sinchkin's gaze was rock steady. Why do you wish to know? Why not just boil me and be done with it? Because I've never boiled another witch and I don't intend to start now. Fine, then let me be on my way. Leave the rock and the path will strough you. Answer my question or leave and burn. The choice is yours. Sinchkin looked at the ground surrounding the small rock. The thought of taking just the lightest step on it was truly twizzlifying. Fine, she told Vienna. Here's what I know of you. You brought frother branches to the Dales that only increased the Lid Sisters' dominion over the skies. You built a great meeting house that only you truly enjoyed. You lived a life convinced you united 4 covens, but in reality, you did little for any of them. You claimed to have settled disputes, yet did so with no knowledge of the long history behind them. You proclaimed your judgments as final, yet you were nothing other than a broom maker from Trasgar. How could you possibly believe anyone would really respect you as anything other than a self-appointed splurk whose only ambition was her own selfish vanity? There was a long silence before Algrin slowly began to chuckle. And I thought mine was bad. Groidel shaman, Vienna. Your legacy is truly splurked. Nonsense, Vienna snapped. It's just the opinion of an oily little weaver. But what if, Algrin teased, she's right and we're wrong? What if that's how other witches really see us? Vienna frowned. Nonsense. We are 2 of the greatest witches. She looked at Sinchkin. And the fates have decreed that you, somehow, shall be the 3rd. Sinchkin began to laugh. Me? Your splurt league means nothing to me. Do you know, Algrin asked her, the true purpose of Treffelpugapar? Sinchkin sighed. Your bird tried to explain it. Frankly, it got incredibly dull. Then let me try, Algrin persisted. It plays with your ambitions. You thought yours was to find it, but it found you. You wanted to map it, but how can you map what constantly moves? 1,000 lifetimes wouldn't be enough. So now you are stuck, unable to leave a mere rock for the rest of your life. And the only person you can blame, Sinchkin, is yourself. In the end, your own free spirit trapped you. Soon, Idler won't be here to guide you anymore. You will simply have what remains of your days to wonder how it all went so terribly wrong. You could leave me that broom, Sinchkin tried. I could fly away. Vienna shook her head. Great unrest is coming, I'm afraid, Sinchkin. All trace of creature witches will soon vanish forever from the magical dales. It's true, Algrin added. Every word. But there is another way, another possibility. The next Grand Zorkli High Priestess will possess the willing heart and mind of a solitary witch. And whilst you are an Earthweaver, you're also an explorer, with a brave heart and bold ambition. While you profess little allegiance to the League of Lid-Curving Witchery, should you choose, you will be the one to truly unite all witches, as the ancients always intended. Or, Vienna warned her, stay on your rock until the path claims you. But both choices are splurked, Sinchkin sourly replied. Either way I strough, here or by the ones of others. None would accept me as leader, and I have no ambition to be one. Then, Vienna sighed, our work here is quite done. We will leave the cauldron. The fire beneath will burn for a while. You could simply end the agony by throwing yourself in. It will be quicker than burning on the path. Goodbye, Sinchkin, and I hope life has given you all the answers you constantly sought. Sinchkin watched as both witches faded before her eyes. looking into the tree for Idler and seeing that it too was empty. All that remained was a bubbling cauldron that began to look increasingly tempting as her tired legs began to wobble on the small rock. Over the next few days, skirmishes broke out between Binaps and Crooked Hats as news of their coven leader's death spread. Each coven blamed the other, all harmony destroyed as sisters sought out each other in increasingly deadly attacks. In and amongst the chaos, old feuds resurfaced, both covens turning not only on each other, but also themselves as the madness grew. Watching and waiting, Alfloria and the Lid sisters timed their moment, keeping themselves as far away from the troubles as they could. "Soon," Alfloria told them, "we will attack the survivors by land and air. All Crooked Hats must be struffed. They're of no use to anyone. Only save the best Binaps as our makers and builders. Those that refuse will boil." The Lid sisters agreed, glad to finally have a leader who commanded more respect than Beth Geller ever had. Temporarily, at least, for in confidently making a pact with the untrustworthy superior sisters of the sky, Alfloria's caution had been crushed by her ambition. Her reign would be short-lived, the Lid sisters simply biding their time before choosing the moment to strike down Alfloria and her Earthweavers to fully inherit both the skies and the earth below. None who survived would ever dare challenge their permanent dominion again. The Dales creatures would learn to fear their new rulers, all thoughts of sharing the Dales forgotten as easily as the League of Lid-Curving Witchery. What started with the Great Crossing would end in a great victory for the Lid sisters, and it would shortly be theirs to seize. Sinchkin awoke with a start, instinctively clinging onto a branch above her head, harsh sunlight in her eyes. Trying to focus, she gradually remembered events from the long night before, how she'd finally summoned the courage to leap from the rock, taking one step on the scorching ground before wrapping herself around the tree trunk and scrambling up into the branches to safety and sleep. How long had she slept? It looked like early morning, but was it another trick of the path? Would the sun suddenly disappear to reveal a silver moon rising in a night full of stars? She looked at the cauldron below, a final few wisps of smoke drifting from underneath. A thick brown liquid cooled inside. There'd be no way she could boil herself in there even if she wanted to. She laughed. The whole situation was utterly preposterous, completely absurd, and worse, totally unfair. What had she ever done to deserve it? Her whole life had simply been dedicated to exploring, wandering the Dales to find new creatures, new places, and recording her observations. Her obsession harmed no one, changed nothing for the worse, yet somehow it had ended here, starving to death in a tree for fear of treading on the ground. Treffelpuggerpath, they'd warned her, would play with her ambitions. And it had. She was powerless to move, hopelessly stuck, alone and getting weaker by the blink snap. But at least, she tried to console herself, it couldn't get any worse. The path, however, had other ideas. Still clinging to the branch, she felt tiny vibrations begin to ripple through her small hands, as the tree's roots now gripped and dug themselves deeper into the soil. The entire tree gradually burying itself as the deadly ground slowly rose up to meet her. "Greudel shaman," she cursed, desperately climbing higher as the tree descended, branches snapping under her grasp as she finally reached the very top. She looked down, the trunk now completely buried, and saw her only option. Taking a deep breath, she yelled and leapt as far as she could, landing a blink-snap later in the cauldron, its lukewarm slurry covering her in foul gloop. "This," she gasped, as the last of the tree disappeared into the ground behind her, "is going too far." She balled her small fist up into the clear blue sky, years of rage and frustration suddenly bursting out. "I've done nothing to deserve this." She shook her head, trying to clear swill from her ears. "And if you think I'm going to stroff in a cold cauldron on your splurt path, you're very wrong. How I stroff is my own choice to make, not yours, and I will prefer it to be free and running, even if I have to burn to death. So do your best, Treffelbugger Path. Stroff me to ashes, but always know that I chose to do it, not you." Wiping her face and gripping her small wand, utterly determined to be mistress of her own destiny, she let out one final yell and leapt from the cauldron onto the ground, eyes screwed tightly shut, waiting for the searing, burning pain. But nothing happened. Taking short, twizzle breaths, she slowly opened her eyes and looked down. All around the ground glowed its fiery red, and yet her feet felt as if they stood on the coolest grass, without the oidiest bit of pain whatsoever. She took a few cautionary steps forward, still waiting for the flames to suddenly seize and bite. Still nothing. She looked back at the cauldron, watching as it too now sank into the hot ground, thick boiling gloops spilling and hissing over the sides until nothing remained. Then she ran, faster than ever before, tears of relief streaming down her small face. "I've done it," she yelled. "I've beaten you, Treffelbugger Path. Because it was always my choice, wasn't it? Not yours." But high up on the steep valley to her side, a sudden cracking brought a new and terrifying danger. Huge boulders now began tumbling down, demolishing trees, bouncing and smashing into each other, leaving vast craters as they hurtled towards her. Twizzled, Sinchkin aimed her wand at the rocks and shot out a quick series of baruches that merely glanced off. The boulders thundered on, the sound filling the whole valley. "Command them," Idla's voice suddenly said. "Command them as the witch of your destiny you now are. Not the Sinchkin you were, but the only witch who has ever walked the path. Command them and believe, Sinchkin." Sinchkin turned, frantically looking for the black raven, seeing nothing, the whole valley just a murderous avalanche. Steeling herself, with just moments to spare, she levelled her wand, crying at the top of her voice, "In the name of the Grand Zorkly High Priestess of the League of Lip-Curving Witchery, I command you to stop!" The rocks froze, as if caught in one of her drawings. One literally hung in the air inches from the top of her hat. She looked down at her wand, its tip still frizzing bright blue. "Idla? Are you there? Do you need me to be? A mere splurked black bird?" Sinchkin tried to smile. I only said that because I was a bit twizzled. Has it occurred to you that I've always been here, if only you choose to ask, and that the ancients have always been watching you?" "I'm not so happy about that bit." Idla's voice chuckled softly in her mind. "The path has shown you your true destiny, the power you really possess, not to map things, but to change them. The League of Lit-Curving needs a new Grand Zorkly High Priestess to fearlessly challenge what seems impossible, to explore and map its bold new beginnings." "But I know nothing of the League," Sinchkin insisted. "And yet you know everything. Now is your time to rise above and be truly Zorkly." Sinchkin watched as slowly the steep valley levelled into one vast sweeping dale. A large boulder above her head plopped gently onto the ground by her side, joining others as it rolled away into the distance. Above came a loud roar as a fire trail split in the clear blue sky and and a huge dragon circled way overhead. Show no fear. She comes to you as she once came to Algarin. Your journey here is done, Sinchkin. The dragon swooped, an enormous shadow racing across the ground as it landed a short distance away and sent out a fiery blast that almost took Sinchkin's hat off. Show no fear, she muttered to herself. Far too easy for a bird to say. Holding out her wand, the tiny witch slowly approached. The dragon's head was 20 times her size. Its mouth would have swallowed her entire burrow. Each peering eye was bigger than the largest horn. And yet the nearer she got, the more the giant beast appeared to settle, its breathing slowing and echoing around the day. When she was close enough, Sinchkin looked up at the enormous head, a talon twice her size shifting in the earth by her feet. My name's Sinchkin, she said. I mean you no harm, and hope the same is true of you. The dragon lowered its head. I wish, Sinchkin went on, to become Zorkly. I wish to become Grand Zorkly High Priestess of the League of Lid-Curving Witchery. The dragon simply looked at her, flicking its long barbed tail dangerously across the ground. But I don't know how, what to do, or why. But I would really love to ride on a dragon. For a while, the beast did nothing, just staring, as if trying to make up its mind. Finally, after what seemed like an age, it offered its neck to climb on. The two of them taking to the sky, Sinchkin's excited cries ringing all round. And as they flew, Treffelpuggerpath followed, twisting and turning underneath like one vast snake, bending rivers, flattening mountains, creating vast gorges, dividing forests, lakes, and clinging to the dragon's beating shadow as together they crossed the magical dales. Far away, in the remote western dale of Chilsop, Alfloria, her Earthweavers, and the Lid Sisters watched from the shelter of the woodland as two great armies of Binaps and Crooked Hats gathered in a vast open plain. Alfloria estimated there must be over 5,000, most of their remaining number. Many had perished in previous battles, raids, and skirmishes between the two covens. This was the day she would strike. When the final battle looked done, the Lid Sisters would take to their brooms, then her Earthweavers would rush from the forest to finish any survivors. After, there would be a great feast. The Lid Sisters would be made to raise their goblets to the famous victory before gulping down the Grimwaggle wine that Alfloria had already waiting for them in poison barrels. She had no need to share her glory with any other coven than her own. The Lid Sisters would be useful on this day, but nothing else besides. By morning, they would all be dead. And then, there would simply be Earthweavers, sole inheritors of the magical dales. All opposition would have been eliminated. Everything would be theirs. A great horn sounded, and the two armies of Binaps and Crooked Hats headed straight for each other. Hundreds of witches from both sides took to the air, streaking down lethal bruises at those below. Many fell from the sky to join the dead. Never had Alfloria seen such slaughter. She licked her lips at the eagerness her enemies willingly blamed and destroyed each other. Each dead witch was one less to worry about. Another step closer to her final ambition. When do we attack? The Lid Sister hissed, keen not to miss out. When they are nearly done, Alfloria smiled. Why waste our precious wrath when they are so obliging at strophing each other for us? The lid sister chuckled, enjoying the spectacle as 3 dead witches fell heavily to the ground just short of the tree line. One still clung to her broom, the end arrowed into the earth, the still smoking body slowly falling off. Needs working on the landing, methinks. What's that? The crouching earthweaver suddenly cried, pointing at the sky. Alfloria narrowed her eyes, peering through the trees as a great roaring dragon parted the skies. Huge fireballs shot from its mouth. Underneath, the very land itself seemed to rise up beneath it, twisting and buckling. Witches on brooms turned and fled. Those on the ground ran screaming for the plain to the cover of the woodland. Bine-naps and crooked hats breathlessly huddled together as the huge beast landed in the ruptured plain, the ground now glowing an ominous bright red, scorching nearby branches. "What do we do?" someone screamed. "Hush!" Alfloria commanded, making out a small, familiar figure dismounting from the back of the dragon's neck. "Sinchkin?" In the open, Sinchkin called into the woodland. "Sisters, I am Sinchkin, Grand Zorkly High Priestess of the League of Lid-Curving Witchery." She sent a screaming broocher into the trees, pleasantly surprised at how powerful her small wand had become. "I give you all 2 choices. Stay here and stroff yourselves, or come with me." No one in the woods dared move. Everyone simply watched and waited. Eventually, a lone twizzled voice called out, "The magic ground will stroff us anyway, or your suspen surely will. Either way, we die." Sinchkin folded her small arms across her chest. "Perhaps not. Perhaps you will be the first one who will have the courage to try." She watched as gradually a dishevelled bine-nap emerged from the tree line, hesitating at the edge of the glowing ground. "Walk with me to a new allegiance in your heart, and no harm will befall you." The bine-nap now took a tentative step, then another and another, before suddenly breaking into a run, overwhelming relief writ large on her battle-scarred face. "You see," Sinchkin told her, "you simply had to believe." Others now began to follow, slowly emerging from the woodland and running towards her. Some stopped and danced on the glowing red, unable to believe they had been saved from the fire, slapping their hands and whooping as the crowd around Sinchkin and the dragon gradually grew. Eventually, just one final witch remained. Sinchkin took a deep breath, calling out into the trees. "Alfloria, it seems your armies and plans have deserted you. Now it's time for you to join us." An angry Vusha shot from the trees by way of reply. "No harm will come to you. You will be dealt with according to the League's ruling." "Come fight with me here, just you alone, for I would rather stroff than ever serve the likes of you." Sinchkin turned, looked into the enormous sea of expectant faces, lid sisters, bine-naps, earthweavers and crooked hats, all waiting. "Stay here," she told them. "No one move." They all watched as the small witch made her way into the trees, wand drawn. Behind, the great dragon raised itself, eyes keenly fixed on the tree line. At the edge, Sinchkin stopped and peered into the gloom. A sudden blue flash lit the interior, and she instinctively ducked, before racing into the woods and seeing an elderly witch dressed in rags bending over Alfloria's stroffed body, wand still frizzing. "Who are you?" she asked, wand levelled. The witch looked up. "Utard," she quietly replied. "I am a solitary, and have waited many, many moon turns for this." "Put away your wand, then," Sinchkin commanded, nudging Alfloria's body with her foot, aware that other similar witches were now also making their way slowly out of the dense woodland. Some were young, some very old and bent double, but all were dressed in the same rags and battered hats as the elderly Utard. "There are more," Utard said. "Those who have been hunted and persecuted for too long. Those who are forced to live a life in the shadows, forage for the most splurt scraps, and only move under the darkest skies. These are but a fraction of their number, but they will tell others, who will tell more still, that they can now walk out into the light with a new hope in their hearts." Sinchkin looked at the sea of sorry faces. Most had terrible scars, missing clumps of fur and rotting teeth. Yet in all their eyes was a silent dignity she'd never seen in any witch before. "You're all solitary witches?" Utard nodded. "Ready to be respected, accepted, and recognised as our own kind?" Sinchkin looked out onto the plain where the others waited. "There'll most likely be some objections." Utard smiled. "Nothing is without risk, Sinchkin. When I first crossed the icy seas, there were fear in all our hearts. When I gave Vianna the Ravenstones, I had no idea if she would ever fulfill her destiny." Sinchkin's eyes widened. "You know those two old splurks?" "I suspect they speak just as kindly of you." Sinchkin smiled. "They left me on an oily rock on Treffelbogger Path. Yet here you are, fine and Zorkly and well. Such things, Sinchkin, such moments in our past are mere blink snaps. Perhaps they're all oily rocks that turn and form their own path and become our true purpose." She gently cupped Sinchkin's face. "And your mistake was always to believe that such a thing could be mapped, when in reality time changes everything too quickly to ever be put down onto just one parchment." Sinchkin took a moment, frowning and rubbing her small face with her paws. "Look, I'm just an oily earthweaver. Destiny and change are far beyond me. You talk of getting the League to accept solitaries amongst them. I'm not sure I could ever persuade the others to accept you all as equals. Not all of us, Sinchkin. For now, I have a very different path to follow." Utard looked out onto the plain at the distant dragon waiting in the sunlight. "She came for me too once, and took me to Trasgar a long time ago. It's why she's here now. She's come to finally take me home." She turned to the rest of the solitary witches. "You'll all be safe now. Sinchkin will make everything right." "How can you be sure?" one hesitantly asked. "Because," Utard quietly replied, "I read it all in some stones, many, many moon turns ago." Sinchkins and the others followed Utard out of the woods and across the plain to where the great dragon lay. On seeing her, it let out a roar, rising on its hind legs and flapping both wings. She turned to Sinchkin. "Some get to pass to the ancients in Idler's wings, but I've always wanted a dragon." The large crowd parted, watching the great beast gently lower his neck for Utard to climb on, Sinchkin helping as best she could, patting the thick scaly skin. I won't see you again then?" "Not for a very long time, and you won't need to." Utard pointed first to Sinchkin's heart, then head. "You have much listening to do, and too much that needs to be done." Sinchkin tried her best to smile, feeling suddenly too small and quite alone. She cleared her throat. When I go, I don't want either a dragon or a splurt bird." Utard raised her eyebrows. "Oh, I wouldn't worry. I've already seen what takes you," she winked. "Some of the other ancients will be quite jealous, I can assure you." The dragon began to move, Sinchkin and the crowd backing away as it bowed one final time before flapping its huge wings and taking to the air. In its diminishing shadow, Treffelpugger Path also snaked away, the churning ground repairing itself as both disappeared over the distant mountains. "Well," Sinchkin said, taking a breath and turning to the crowd, "it seems I have a league to build." Sinchkin's reign as Grand Zorkly High Priestess of the League of Lid-Curving Witchery will be remembered for far more events than can ever be chronicled in just one book. In her time, she achieved many spectacular Zorkly magical things, managing to unify all 4 covens and solitary witches into just one league, which grew to number over 20,000 strong at the time of her own passing. Indeed, the little Earthweaver, who had bought peace in Dragon's Plain, never forgot to rule with both head and heart, but also managed to stay true to her own sense of inquisitiveness and urge for exploration. She herself chronicled many of her own adventures, leaving behind vast rooms of maps, notebooks and sketches, all inscribed with her very own system of marks, scribbles and symbols that would one day form the beginning of the League's Zorkly Charter, and is still honoured and pored over by both Dale's creatures and witch scholars as a unique record of the lifetime of this extraordinary little witch. And when the time came for her to pass to the ancients, those assembled in her bedchamber remembered 2 things. Firstly, that she smiled, and secondly, that her last words were, "Thank goodness it's not the dragon or that splurked bird." How she travelled on her very final adventure, we'll never know. In the centuries that followed, much changed in the League of Lid-Curving Witchery's homelands, with the arrival of a brand new creature that was to challenge the destiny of this most magical and Zorkly place forever. The age of the magical hares was just about to begin. You have been listening to The League of Lid-Curving Witchery by Phil and Jackie Lovesey, adapted for your audio enjoyment by Ursula Grifftarth and Stoltz and Phil Lovesey, who would like to point out that no creature witches were harmed during the making of this Magicast. For more information about creature witches, the League, Matlock the Hare and the Magical Dales, simply visit www.matlockthehare.co.